Današnja industrijska poljoprivreda za sobom ostavlja osiromašena tla i hranu sa sve manje nutrijenata. Nasuprot njoj stoje mnoge škole organske poljoprivrede, od kojih je jedna i Vedska organska poljoprivreda. Ona je započela sa slavnim indijskim guruom Maharišijem. Unutar vedske poljoprivrede ne koriste se pesticidi, a ona se temelji na prečesto ignoriranim zakonima prirode. Osim što poboljšava kvalitetu tla, uz manje rada daje veće prinose i bolji urod, uz manje korova i štetočina. Sinteza je to drevnih i modernih saznanja, zasnovana na razumijevanju temeljne, cjelovite inteligencije prirode. Već godinama seminare o vedskoj poljoprivredi održava dr. Peter Swan iz Instituta za vedsku prirodnu poljoprivredu u Nizozemskoj. Teško je zamisliti da uz umjetna gnojiva, oranje i kopanje oštećuju biološku vrijednost tla i smanjuju nutritivnu vrijednost biljnih proizvoda, ali granice onog što čovjek može zapravo su granice onog što on zna. A što je sve moguće, najčešće treba potražiti ovdje, na rubu znanosti. Dobro večer. Peter Swan, stručnjak je za vedsku ekološku poljoprivredu i urbano vrtlarstvo. Dobro večer.
Good evening, Krishmir. Thanks for inviting me to join you today.
U biti bi se ja htio zahvaliti vama što ćete nam predstaviti cijeli jedan drugačiji pogled na poljoprivredu sa vrlo, rekao bih, uvjerljivim i primjerima koji pokazuju da je zapravo i moguće drugačije, da je moguće možda ekstenzivnu poljoprivredu razvijati i na načine koji nisu nužno vezani uz iscrpljivanje tla i sl. No, danas postoji puno raznih smjerova organske poljoprivrede i oni se nekad i prepliču, nekad su i različiti. One koje vi na neki način predajete po svijetu već godinama zove se vedska poljoprivreda. Pa što bi to bila vedska poljoprivreda?
Beautiful. Vedic agriculture is agriculture based on natural law. That means that we don't violate natural law. Organic agriculture means without chemicals. But Vedic agriculture takes it a step further. That means it creates the optimally nutritious food for higher consciousness, higher development of the individual, and at the same time restoring the ground to optimal functioning. This is Vedic agriculture.
Koja su dva principa koja zapravo čine vedsku agrikulturu? Na neki način ste ih spomenuli, korištenje tehnika koja ne štete tlu i naravno da je na neki način svijest poljoprivrednika u skladu s prirodnim zakonima. Pa prije nego pogledamo što se može napraviti po pitanju uzgoja hrane na bolji način, možda bi bilo dobro slikati trenutak u kojem smo danas. Ne ponavlja se zapravo dovoljno često koliko ekstenzivna poljoprivreda, još pogotovo od 70. godina i vremena takozvane zelene revolucije, iscrpljuje tlo, vjetar odnosi tlo zbog monokultura, nema više korova koji bi ga držali i slično. No danas se to može izraziti i u brojkama, pa čak i u kartama. Pa eto, na koji način možemo tako reći suvremeni tehnologizirani načini poljoprivrede osiromašuju i u kojem rasponu se to već dogodilo kada je riječ o tlima, a i samim proizvodima?
Yeah. Basically, there are a few ways. The first is the use of bigger and bigger machines, right? The tractors, they used to weigh 2 tons, 3 tons. Now they weigh 7, 8, 9, 10 tons. You know, huge machines we drive on the fields. They crush, they compress the soil. Second is, of course, chemicals. All the chemicals we use have an adverse effect on the soil and the organisms in the soil, the microbiome. Thirdly, plowing is probably the biggest destroyer, degrader of the soil. Why? Because when you plow, that plowing means turning the soil, right? You destroy the city in the soil. There's a city in the soil. All the organisms construct at different layers, different channels for air, like aircon, and for irrigation, water transport, for food transportation. And all these organisms are working together, talking to each other day and night. And this is a city in the soil with the plants and the bacteria and the fungal mycorrhiza, which are the microscopic fungal threads in the soil, which connect all the plants to each other. So all of this gets destroyed when you plow. The structure, which is made by these organisms, gets destroyed. So before the soil is constructed, it's just sand, silt, and clay. But now they stick it together in tiny, first of all, in micro aggregates made by bacteria. That's like the bricks in the house. Then those get put together as walls. And those get to put together into rooms, and then into big pathways, you know, passageways, and then into highways. Highways are like where the moles go, you know, and the mice and the snakes in the soil. So all of this gets destroyed, and it's no longer stuck together. So as you said, when the wind blows, it blows away. When the rain comes, it gets washed away. Now we have the situation that more than 94% of the world's soils, agricultural soils, have been degraded. 40% of it really seriously degraded. And this is United Nations figures. So all our soils, which were nourishing every nation, nourishing the people of the nation, they are all very much degraded. This is the situation that we have.
Što se zbiva sa gubitkom nutrijenata? U kojem rasponu je posljedično zbog iscrpljivanja tla došlo i do manje količine nutrijenata u hrani i u kojem rasponu?
The range since the introduction of chemical industrial agriculture, 1945, around there, it varies in different minerals. Copper has been most heavily hit, both in the vegetables and fruits and in milk products. And then phosphorus and potassium and magnesium, all the others reduced very significantly. We're talking 20%, 30%, 50%, okay? In very shocking research coming out of Wageningen University in Holland, they found that between 2001 and 2008, all the vitamin C in chicory was lost. Just in those 7 years, all the vitamin C was lost. The vitamin C in broccoli, no, it was not the vitamin C in broccoli, it was the vitamin C in cucumbers, 99% lost. The vitamins in broccoli, 84% lost. Vitamins in cauliflower, 64% lost. So this is the range we're talking about. Total loss of all the nutrients, you know? It's really shocking.
Te brojke su doista zastrašujuće. Nekako kada čovjek kupi jednu od tih voćke koje su možda i prevelike i sa premalo okusa, nekako se ipak nada da je nešto ostalo, da ne može biti recimo krastavac bez C vitamina uopće, ali evo, izgleda da može. Kao što se obično kaže, granice mogućeg su granice onog što možeš zamisliti. Evo, sad možemo i ovo zamisliti. No, pitanje glasi onda, danas pričamo o, recimo, vedskoj poljoprivredi, koja uključuje organsku poljoprivredu i još neke druge, da kažemo tako, faktore. Što se zapravo i na koji način može učiniti, kako se može pristupati tim tlima i tim poljima na neki drugačiji način koji bi upravo imao reverzibilni proces od ovog uništavajućeg?
Thank you for asking this question. It's my favorite theme. Is we can farm without plowing, without turning the soil. And the main fundamental way of doing it is in the autumn we sow a cover crop. For example, rye and vetch. Now rye gives carbon, vetch gives nitrogen. So the two together, you've got a nice balance there. This cover crop is sown in September, and then around now, and then it comes up and protects the field all during the winter. There's no erosion. The organisms in the soil get fed by these small cover crops, and then in the spring it comes up in April. And then when it has flowered and set seed, you roll it. But the seed should not be ripe. It should be milk ripe. Otherwise it will grow again in the summer, and then you'll have a problem. the rye, okay? So it comes up, it sets the seed, but the seed is milk ripe. Then you roll it and it gets crushed and it cannot come up again. Now you have a nice thick mulch over the whole field. And then into that, with a direct seeder, which doesn't plow, it just opens the soil slightly and the pipe puts the seed into the soil, and some wheels behind that you can see on the picture, they close that groove. And then your summer crop comes out of there. Now, what have you got? You've got the whole field covered with a thick mulch. That means there's no erosion. It means that the moisture loss is minimal because the mulch protects it. In fact, there's a gain in moisture. How so? Because when the moisture is evaporating through the capillaries of the soil and it reaches the mulch layer, then it condenses there. And when it condenses, then it starts to accumulate there. And that's right where the plant roots are. They love it. So the bacteria, the fungi, the plant roots, they all are and the moisture are maximum there. The bacteria and fungi are digesting the straw from the winter crop, and they are providing the nutrients to the summer crop. That summer crop could be kukuruza, it could be tikva, it could be any summer crop. This type of system has been tried with every type of crop on all continents. So it's very well proven. Now what happens is the crop grows up with no problem with moisture. It's got an even supply of moisture through the whole season, even if there's very little rain. And you get especially good results when there's very dry seasons. So there are very few pests, very few diseases, there's no erosion, and the crop is very well nourished. And more important from the question you asked is that the soil improves every year. And this is shown in many continents, that the soil improves every year on these farms. So instead of degrading the soil, we are restoring the soil, getting the same or higher crop yields with much less work, with much less fuel and pollution, with no chemical fertilizer, with probably no chemical pesticide or herbicide. It's like magic.
Ima li u takvim situacijama dolazili do pojave korova?
No. Usually no weeds. Sometimes a few. Why they don't come up? Because there's this thick mulch there. The crop can come up because you put it in a little groove. But the weeds don't come up because they are all over the field. They are in the soil there. So they can't come up. But if they come, then they come much later than the crop, and then they support the crop because they call different insects which are protective to the crop and so on. So weeds, again, another problem which is completely solved. And another problem which is solved is the crusting of the soil. You know, when you plow, then the soil is exposed, and then when the rain comes, it beats down on the exposed soil, and it shatters the aggregate of the soil. And then the bigger particles of sand, they get pushed down, and the tiny particles of clay come up in this beating, of the rain. And then you get a crust, like on a bread. And that crust is hard, and then the little seedlings can't come through. And you lose a lot on that. Hundreds of dollars per hectare all over the world every year. So this is completely solved when you have the mulch on the surface.
Ove slike koje su pokazivale dio procesa o kojem ste pričali, također pokazuju još nešto kako je na kraju krajeva plod lijepo izvaditi čistog sa malča, umjesto da ga se mora iskopavati zemlje, čistiti od blata. Nije ni to nevrijedno zamjećivanje. Kakvi strojevi su uključeni? Neko bi možda pomislio da je riječ o nekakvom, makar smo vidjeli te strojeve, o nekoj ideji da zapravo se vraćamo u neka doba vrlo često se takva vrst poljoprivrede nekako ticala malih vrtova, malih poljoprivrednika. Međutim, ovdje vidimo i također strojeve koji su uključeni jer je riječ o velikim poljima. Kakvi su to strojevi, na koji način oni u stvari rade i čuvaju tlo?
Yeah, actually, you can go from doing it by hand in your garden to doing it behind a donkey with one groove, to doing it behind a small hand tractor with 2 or 3 grooves, to doing it behind a small tractor, like a Massey Ferguson from 1960s, with 5 grooves, to a bigger one with 10 or 12, up to 18 to 20 meter direct seeders. The machine is called a direct seeder because you don't need to plow, you directly put the seed in the soil without plowing. Direct seeders.
Ove ručne metode, pretpostavljamo, stavljamo vrtlarima. Oni mogu iste metode koristiti bez strojeva.
Yes, they can. But here in Europe, we have the biggest problem, the biggest pest in Europe is the slug. You know the slug?
Yes.
Without the house. And it eats all our vegetables and our flowers. And it likes to live in the mulch. So it's better in Europe usually to take all your garden waste, make compost, which is quite a simple thing, and then put the compost bag on the field, once on your garden bed, make a raised bed, and here you can see a picture of a top gardener, Charles Dowding. Or maybe not, huh? Okay, I don't think I sent it to you. Okay, so for example, you can make a little bit of a raised bed in your garden and every year put maybe 3, 4, 5 centimeters of compost on, and then the compost, if it's made thermal compost, it will have no viable weed seeds in it. So again, you have the protection from the weeds, and secondly, you have some protection from slugs. They don't like compost very much. And the problem of fertility is completely solved.
Gdje biljke i kojim mehanizmima u stvari dobivaju nutrijente?
It's a beautiful question. And this is what we all asked, I think, when we were children, because our fathers were applying chemical fertilizer. And we're looking at the forest and saying, but they don't get chemical fertilizer. How do they get their food? Where they get it from is from what is called the soil food web. It is the microbes in the soil. And how it works is this, that the plants, trees, flowers, cabbages, everything, they produce, by photosynthesis, they produce nice sugary syrup in their leaves, okay? Photosynthesis produces carbohydrates. So they have this carbohydrates produced in their leaves. It gets sent down to the rest of the plant. And about 20 to 85%, depending on the plant, of this carbohydrate goes down into the roots to nourish and provide for the roots. Of what goes into the roots, 50% gets put out, exuded out near the tips of the roots to feed the microbes which are living around the roots, bacteria and fungi, fungal mycorrhiza, these microscopic we're talking. Huh? They get from the plant this carbohydrate. In turn, the bacteria, they're eating the carbohydrate. They, in turn, get eaten by slightly bigger microbes, like amoeba, like flagellates, okay? Slightly bigger guys. And when these amoeba eat the bacteria, then they are too rich a source of minerals, like nitrogen. For example, the bacteria is 5-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. The amoeba is 20-to-1 carbon to nitrogen. So when the amoeba eats the bacteria, he's got 4 times too much nitrogen, and that's toxic to him. So he has to spit it out immediately into the soil. That is right on the root of the plant. So the plant gets this nitrogen from the bacteria via the amoeba. And that's where they get all their nutrients from. Not just the nitrogen, but also the phosphorus and potassium and magnesium and barium and all the nutrients.
Znači, samo ih pusti na miru. Kada se promatra ovakav povezani sustav,
Not just leave them alone. We have to care for them. We have to see that they have plants to get their carbon from, and we have to see that they are not disturbed too much. Whenever we disturb that city in the soil where they live, which they construct, then we damage the soil, and then we need chemical fertilizer.
Zato sam i rekao, pustimo ih na miru. Ovdje se priča o jednom povezanom sustavu koji je složen tako da ga se može jedno opisati kao ovako jedan vrlo inteligentan sustav. Pretpostavljam da je upravo ta povezanost dio onog u čemu se vedska poljoprivreda razlikuje ili nadgrađuje, da kažemo, ostalu organsku, to što slijedi, kako je rečeno, prirodni zakon. Na koji se zapravo prirodni zakon misli i da li ta inteligencija i povezanost prirode da sama rješava unaprijed sve, smišlja vlastita dušična gnojiva, je li to ta inteligencija prirode, je li to taj prirodni zakon koji se prati ili je to nešto drugo?
Yes, it is. And the overarching law of nature is the law of least action. And it governs all of natural law. It's the most fundamental law of nature, you could say. The law of least action. So what I just described to you is how the nature provides the food in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, in exactly the right amount for the plants. And the plants control this whole process. The plants control the populations which provide their nutrients by how much and what type of carbohydrate they exude at what time of the year. For example, and each plant has a different fingerprint, a different mix of carbohydrate which it exudes. Now, even different hybrids have different carbohydrate types that they exude. So the plants, for example, lipa tree, they start exuding carbohydrates 4 weeks before the first buds start showing in spring. So they start feeding their friends, their cows, down in the earth 4 weeks ahead of time, so that those guys, the bacteria and the fungi, they can start getting busy and they can start providing the minerals that the lipa tree needs for the spring burst.
Kad ste spomenuli da je princip...
It's completely intelligent and it's controlled by the plant. It's the two sides of intelligence, above the ground and below the ground, they are like two sides of one coin. The one can't really exist without the other. But it's the guys above the ground who control the whole system.
Kada pričamo o tome da je jedan od prirodnih zakona uložiti najmanji mogući napor, zanimljivo je što postoje primjeri sađenja vrlo malo sjemenja. I onda se nešto neobično događa. Pa eto, na svojim predavanjima, tako ćete, očito i sada ćete nam reći neke primjere i što se tu u stvari radi i što se u stvari dobiva kada se tako samo par sjemenja posadi.
Well, a few years ago, the world record for rice production was achieved 22.4 tons per hectare of rice. Per hectare of rice, 22.4 tons. In an organic way, by this system called system of root intensification. It was developed by a French Jesuit priest in Madagascar. Now it's used in India, in Thailand, all over, more and more. And it consists mainly of planting fewer rice plants in the same area, giving them a bit longer, taking care that they get all the nutrients to build up a good, strong root system. Another Frenchman worked, his name was Marc Bonfils, and he developed a system for growing small grains, winter grains like winter wheat or rye. What he did was, he planted 4 seeds per square meter. instead of 370 seeds, which is normal, okay? So normally the farmer sows about 170 kilos of wheat per hectare. Mark Bonfils sows 1.7 hectares, 4 seeds per square meter. And he sows them much earlier, not in middle of September, like most of the farmers do, but he sows it in late June or July. And what happens is they've got the whole second half of the summer to develop a huge root system, and they've got the space to do that. And then they go through the winter as much bigger, sturdier plants, and in the spring, instead of sending up 1, maybe 2 tillers, we call these stalks tillers with an ear on the end, yeah? Instead of sending up 1 or 2, they send up 150 or 200 per plant. And these ears, they have many more earlets and many more seeds on them than the regular ones. And the seeds are much bigger. So, what has he got? He's getting, on a bad year, 20 tons of wheat per hectare instead of 3, 4, 5 tons. So this is the kind of possibility that we have, and the best would be to grow that in a permanent cover crop of clover to keep the weeds down and to provide the extra nitrogen for these huge bushes of wheat that come up.
Dio vedske tradicije, a eto u proteklih, ko zna, prije koliko godina, bili su nam u gostima neki vedski panditi koji su poznati po svojim pjevanjima i sve to dio jedne vedske tradicije koja u stvari puno polaže na ideju o vibraciji i zvuku. Pa ono što možda nije praksa na zapadu neće ni biti, možda nećemo tako skoro vidjeti poljoprivrednike kako pjevaju kukuruzu, ali dio te tradicije također je i to pjevanje. Naravno, danas postoje mnogi ljudi koji su već davno primijetili da i biljke vole glazbu, pa i rastu bolje kad im se svira, poklanja pažnja i slično. Međutim, ovdje nije samo riječ o ljepoti glazbe. Što je u toj tradiciji vedskih pandita, a što je povezano s vedskom poljoprivredom, da na neki način je dio poboljšanja usjeva?
What they do is they recite specific portions of the Vedic literature which enliven the laws of nature for that specific stage of growth of the plant. Like when you put the seed in the soil, that's one stage. It has to swell and absorb the moisture. Then it has to sprout. Then it has to spread its leaves. Then it has to make flowers. Then it has to make seed. So there are 8 stages, and they recite specific frequencies, you could say, to ensure that the plant develops fully in that stage, so that we get a crop which is completely nourishing for higher consciousness, higher health, better quality of life.
U sklopu općenito vedske tradicije koja je na zapadu najstarija i najrazvijena na neki način i poznata kroz transcendentalnu meditaciju koja je ovdje još od 60. godina, rađena su mnoga istraživanja koja su bila vezana uz taj suptilni utjecaj na svijet, pa recimo kolektivne meditacije koje su, gdje se pokušavalo ustanoviti imali utjecaj na društvo i slično. Danas su ta istraživanja također prisutna, tako da bi bilo možda prije nego što saznamo što se danas biva, a bilo je gostiju iz transcendentalne meditacije u proteklih godina koji su se bavili specifičnim mjerenjima i pokazivanjima na koji način koja meditacija utječe na valove mozga i slično. Bilo bi zanimljivo ipak možda se podsjetiti kada i kako se istraživao utjecaj meditacije na društvo i na okoliš i s kakvim rezultatima.
Yes, plenty. And this started in the 70s when they found that 1% of a city population meditating, not together, just in their homes, reduced the crime, sickness and accident rates. Then this kind of study was replicated in more cities and in whole countries like New Zealand and Norway. They got 1% of the population meditating. And then they've been very peaceful since then and very, nice place to live. And then with the advanced meditation techniques like TM City program, including yogic flying, this is more powerful. And what they found then was that the square root of 1% of the population practicing together is enough to bring about the same result. So, for example, in Croatia, you have 4.1 million people, okay, population. So that means you need 41,000 meditators to create this so-called Maharshi effect of reduced crime, reduced negativity, and increased positivity, increased economy, and so on. But you only need about 200 doing the advanced program. And this is our purpose, is to support the government and support the people by creating a group that will take care of the collective consciousness. This is a new technology that you can actually raise the collective consciousness with a small group of professionals who do this meditation. And this can bring about what we call invincibility. Because if the collective consciousness of the nation is harmonious, then you don't create enemies. You can be invincible only if you don't create enemies, if you don't have enemies. And this is how we do it, by reducing the internal disorder or entropy in the collective consciousness. So it's a very beautiful new stage that we've reached in public administration to have dedicated professional groups whose job it is to create coherence, harmony, call it what you like, in the collective consciousness, to support the government's administration.
Kada je fizičar John Hegel negdje 1994. godine u Washingtonu, koji je bio dosta poznat u to vrijeme po kriminalu, organizirao višetjedne kolektivne meditacije određenog postotka populacije. Na koji način se zapravo radio taj eksperiment i na koji način se uopće pokušavalo ustanoviti, a to se par godina kasnije radilo na Bliskom istoku u vrijeme ratnih operacija, na koji način se uopće može ili pokušava ustanoviti je li došlo do povećanja koherencije ili ne, s obzirom da tu skoro da pričamo o razini osobnog dojma na neki način ili nečeg što je doista teško egzaktno i uhvatljivo, jer i samo kad vi kažete razina nasilja, što to uopće znači? Da li neko ko se tuče u kući, neko ko puca po nekome, nemir iznutra. Na koji način su uopće ta istraživanja baš u Americi bila provođenja? Koji je bio njihov protokol?
The police keep their records. They know how many homicides there are, how many motor car accidents there are, how many violent assaults, etc. Okay, robberies. So, the key in that research study that you mentioned in Washington, D.C., was to predict in advance that from this time until this time, we will reduce all the negative trends by 23–25%. Now, that's very difficult to say. Nobody can say that, you know, in 2 weeks' time, for a period of 2 weeks, we will reduce the negative trends in Washington, D.C. by 25%. So if you do that, and you announce it in the press publicly, and you tell the police, and you ask the police to provide their statistics before, during, and after, then you've got a solid case.
I kakvi su bili rezultati? Jesu li predviđanja se obistinila?
They achieved it, yes. They achieved it. They achieved the reduction in violent crimes, which was surprising because it was in the summer, and every summer the violent crimes go up, and we know from Ayurveda that is pitta increasing in, you know, the fiery element increasing in summer, and so always violent crimes increase during summer, especially the hottest part, August, you know, and they decreased dramatically, and motor car accidents and so on.
Pa eto, donijeli ste jedan mali video koji pokazuje učinke meditacije na mozak tijekom, zapravo rekao bih skoro odmah. Pa eto, pogledat ćemo jednu demonstraciju na kojoj se vidi koliko zapravo brzo mozak ulazi u stanje više koherencije prilikom meditacije, naravno i dalje vrijedi ona stara, samo vježba čini majstora.
This is a recording of live brainwave activity of a practitioner of Maharshi's transcendental meditation technique. There are a number of screens you're viewing right now as the EEG is being analyzed by the computer. And notice your attention on the size of these waves and the nature of the coherence. So the person's begun the TM technique. Notice the changes right away. Within about less than 1 second, the individual has been able to shift their entire brainwave activity from a very diversified, outward-oriented mode of functioning to a very unified and powerful, inward-oriented form of awareness or consciousness.
Ovih nekoliko snimaka valova pokazuju zapravo koliko brzo dolazi do onog što se naziva koherencija u mozgu prilikom meditacije. No što to u stvari jest? Što se u mozgu zbiva i što je ono što se u uobičajenom stanju ne zbiva, a bilo bi možda poželjno da se zbiva?
What we see in the still shot of this video is that the brain, on the top bar, we see the left side of the front part of the brain, and on the second bar is the right side of the brain. And what we see is they're going along with their brain activity, and in the middle, where the person starts to meditate, then suddenly those waves become double the size or more. This indicates that the brain, the activity in the frontal part of the brain became much more powerful. The frontal part of the brain is the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of the brain. It is responsible for things, higher order functions like planning and decision-making and moral qualities. And so what we see when it becomes more powerful is that fight or flight response is getting less, and rational, moral decision-making is getting more. And at the same time, in the bottom bar, what we see is that this indicates the coherence between the left and the right sides above. And what we see is that before he started to meditate, or she, I don't know if it was a male or a female, then the coherence was fluctuating on average, let's say, around 65%. The moment they started meditating, instantaneously, as you said, it goes up to around 95, 98%. So this is what happens when you experience inner wholeness, when you transcend, when you experience inner wholeness, inner peace, that the mind is not directed, but it's alert. We call it the state of restful alertness. Then the brain starts functioning as a whole, for the first time probably. And that's a beautiful experience. And this whole brain functioning is the basis of the peace that the person experiences and that the society experiences.
No, zanimljivo je da osim te izvan svake sumnje pozitivne promjene koja smiruje čovjeka, razne vrste vježbanja svjesne pažnje i na taj neki način preoblikovanja vlastitog mozga se mogu koristiti i za postizanje rezultata u svakodnevnom životu, možda nekih i vrhunskih dostignuća koja često puta nisu moguća bez onog što se događa kada sportaš obično kaže se uđe u zonu. To je ono jednostavno kad se nogometašu lijepi lopta za nogu jer jednostavno on se uskladio sa svim faktorima oko sebe na neki način. O tome pričaju i trkači, muzičari znaju taj trenutak kad se dogodi nešto gdje zapravo sve ide samo od sebe. Pa kako su najnovija istraživanja početak 21. stoljeća njima obilježena na razne načine kad je riječ o poboljšavanju zapravo, s obzirom da je mozak direktor, ako on ima način funkcioniranja koji je vezan uz one njegove najbolje kapacitete, nekako zaobiđe ove starinske dijelove mozga koje ga tjeraju u strah, borbu za preživljavanje i slično, koji reagiraju odmah, dok on ipak se mora malo upaliti. Kakva su istraživanja bila vezana uz postizanja tako nekog vrhunskih izvedbi u raznim disciplinama?
It's beautiful. You're a musician as well as being a TV man, and what it shows is that top performers, world-class musicians, world-class businessmen, world-class athletes, they all share a similar brain pattern. That is, high coherence in the brain, high brain development, high connectedness in the brain. Brain is functioning more as a whole than in the general population. And that's why they are top performers, of course, because the brain is functioning more effectively. It's like if you have in your motor car, if it's not well tuned, then it won't go fast, even if it's a Ferrari. But if it is well tuned, then it'll be smooth and it'll go fast. Same with the brain. So the people who achieve really top peak level of achievement, it's because their brain is functioning beautifully. And that same beautiful functioning of the brain is developed through transcending, through that experience of inner wholeness, it's called Satchit Anand in Sanskrit. It means pure bliss consciousness. It's beyond thinking, it's beyond imagining, it's beyond any mental activity. It is our own self. And that is what we get a taste of each time we transcend.
To je znači neka vrst budne pažnje bez građenja scenarija za svaki detalj oko nas. Možda bi se tako moglo suvremenom čovjeku to malo jednostavnije čak objasniti. Eto, ovih zadnjih nekoliko minuta možemo se opet vratiti onome od kuda smo i počeli, a to je vedska poljoprivreda, odnosno njeni principi, kako god ih se zvalo, može ih se zvati slobodno i organskim principima, s obzirom da veliki dio onog što ste pričali je utemeljeno u samoj prirodi odnosa između mikroorganizama, biljaka i zapravo nije, i bez funkcionira i bez nadgradnje. Koliko danas, eto u svijetu već desetljećima po svijetu podučavate takav vid poljoprivrede? Je li on negdje zaživio? Ne može ga se baš vidjeti na svakom uglu. U kojoj mjeri i se ljudi prihvate takve metode, pogotovo ako ona ima i manje troškove i veće prinose i manje rada, čovjek bi očekivao da se to raširi kao nekakvi mikroorganizam. Međutim, eto, nije baš toliko raširena. U kojoj mjeri jest, gdje, s kakvim rezultatima?
The thing is that I farm the way my father farmed. And he farms the way his father farmed. People are very conservative. And all the services from government, they are all in favor of chemical industrial agriculture. So it's difficult for farmers to change. And the way it spreads, and it is spreading, and people are doing this kind of farming in every country, but few. How it spreads is that the farmer hears about it, and he gets in touch with another farmer who is a leader in this field, who is an innovator in this field, and he learns something from him, and that's how it spreads grassroots way. And the really successful farmers, like the ones we've seen the pictures of this evening, they become real teachers. And many farmers come to them, and they have field days and field weekends, and that's how it spreads, not through government support at all, just private exchange.
Tu je riječ o nekoj vrsti samoorganizacije. Međutim, s obzirom da je doista lako ustanoviti je li neka metoda korisna za poboljšavanje količine usjeva ili nije, samim time što se skuša godinu, dvije, tri, pretpostavljam da u dugom stažu i na kraju u dugim godinama pojedinačnih praksi se događalo da se pojave u blizini i agronomi sa fakulteta ili iz nekih drugih institucija koje se uvezane uz znanost o poljoprivredi i sada, eto, suočeni su s nekim konceptom koji je možda drugačiji od onog što su učili. U kojoj mjeri su se pokazala iskustva da na neki način takva znanja idu?
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not.
Što mislite zbog čega?
Because they are supported by the pharmaceutical, agro-industrial industry, right? That's who supports their faculties. So I gave a lecture at the Agriculture University in Vienna. And the guy was very interested. He was a Buddhist himself, and he was meditating and so on. But afterwards, I asked him, so you think you'd like to use some of this? He said, no. They can't move, you know? Because the policy of the university, the funding of the university, it's all moving in that direction. And it's very difficult for the guys in the academic field and the guys who have a nice bank loan to buy the stuff that I need, the fertilizer and the seeds for this year. It's hard for them to go to the bank manager and say, okay, now this year I'm not going to plow and I don't want any fertilizer and I don't want any pesticide or herbicide, but will you give me the money for the seed? Then what are you as the bank manager going to say?
Meni se ipak čini da bi razni pojedinci na sličnim institucijama i obrazovnim i drugim zapravo takve eksperimente mogli raditi kao što se prije ovih godina radili recimo eksperimenti s konopljom gdje se promatralo u kojoj mjeri ona hrani tlo i slično, jer nekako se pokazalo da neki entuzijastični pojedinci uvijek nađu neki način da ih zainteresira. Ta tema, pitanje je samo čuju li oni igdje za nju, postoji li neki kanal informacija kojim uopće tako nešto i dopire do njih, jer očito je to skoro slučajnost, hoće li se netko naći ili jasna namjera da već znamo naprijed da se želi recimo baviti vedskom poljoprivredom. Ko su polaznici vaših tečaja obično?
The farmers who are into meditation or into permaculture, or they find out about it on the internet, you know, all these successful organic farmers, they have their own websites. So, you know, the internet is a great help. And what we have these days is that the collective consciousness of the world is rising very, very quickly. And what is possible today was not possible 2 years ago. So now, my experience is that people can take a step that they couldn't take 2 years ago. So I think it's going to change very quickly in the years to come.
Gospodine Svon, sa ovim riječima optimizma i nade ćemo se i rastati. Sretan put natrag ili gdje god krenuli i do neke sljedeće prilike. Doviđenja.
Thank you. And thank you for all you are doing every week to bring the best of scientific openings to the people of Croatia.
Pa, eto, molim. Eto, hvala vama na pažnji. Našim svijetom i nama samima vladaju navike, pa tako i navike načina razmišljanja, a one kao da imaju neki svoj vlastiti život, pa se jednostavno prosljeđuju generacijama. I zato danas postoji jedna prevladavajuća slika o tome kako proizvoditi velike količine hrane za svijet u kojem naizgled treba sve više. To se naravno radi pomoću tehnologije, no postoji drugačije vrste tehnologija, možemo ih nazvati netehnološke tehnologije, koje uz manje daju više u kvantitativnom smislu, a kad je riječ o nutrijentima, također i u kvantitativnom smislu. Danas su neki od tih mehanizama već dobro istraženi, pa ponekad ima mjesta i čuđenju zapravo koliko se pokazuju kao možda bolji, jeftiniji i zdraviji način poljoprivrede, ali ipak eto, teško nalazi mjesto u svijetu koji iscrpljuje tlo i zbog toga izražava zabrinutost. Potom rješenje za taj problem nalazi u tehnikama koje još više iscrpljuju tlo, no u ovo doba dana možemo si mi dopustiti malo iscrpljenosti. To znači da je vrijeme za laku noć.